So this will be a comprehensive developer tutorial, assuming that you've installed FriendOS from scratch and have it running on your computer. So I'm not going to go through the installation procedure. If you need that, you'll find that updated on our GitHub repository. I've essentially done a clean install of the latest master branch of FriendOS. And I'm going to do most of my development today inside of FriendOS. So let's just get started. The first thing I'll do is I'll log in with my administrator account. And you get into this basic setup. I've done some small tweaks in here. So I'll just go into full screen mode. The first thing you're going to do is start friend create. And of course, if you have got access to the developer's manual, you'd probably be wise to refer to that one. I don't really need that manual, obviously, because I've been writing it. So I'll just go straight into making a first project. And what I'll do today, I'll essentially make an application with some interactive bits and some user interface, and then I'll make a package, and I'll make the source code available afterwards. So obviously you could be using any development tool that you want for Friend, but for the simplicity of showing off the Friend environment, the only external tool I'll be using is the debugger that's built into Chrome. And usually you should be able to access that easily with F12, or on Mac you may have to use all your fingers on the keyboard at the same time to get it up. It's located in the developer menu up here. If you're a developer, you know where it is. And other than that, let's just get started. So when you're building a friend application, it's very important that you understand a couple of things to get started. One of those things that you should understand is that each friend application that's built using our APIs will be executed in an iframed sandbox. And that iframed sandbox is injected with the friend API, so that is just immediately available to the developer. And how a friend application runs is that it executes the application run method. So the application object is initialized in every sandbox in Friend. The sandbox can be for the executable JavaScript that you run when you execute the application. And the sandbox will also be initialized on any window, screen, or widget that you would be using for user interface. So I'll just get started immediately and make my run function. And I'll simply save this in the project folder. And so since this is a clean system, I'll simply make the project folder. And in there, I'll create interactive demo, will be our name, and I'll make a project file in there. Boom, so now we have a project. And let me see, I just did that the wrong way. Let me see. It should be JSX, of course, because the project will be done when you create a new project and we'll put that into our folder, and we'll just simply overwrite the APF file we just created. And in here, we'll call it interactive demo and put in my name as author. And be bold and put version 1.0. I'll put it into demonstration. Just an interactive demo. So there we go. I don't have any icon for this one, but this is something you could add, and you add that by clicking on add images. But I'll add a privilege on this one. I want to have access to the system module, and I want to have access to the system library. It's a library system, and I want to have access to all disks. There we go. And now I'll add my JSX in there. I'll add that, and then I'll save. So now I don't need to be in the browse mode, I can be in the project mode, and now I have my project file. So in my application run, I can put a small comment as to what this application is doing. Simple interactive demo showing of some features of FriendOS. And in here, usually I start with some code, and the code is so standard that it could have been made into a template for any application that you build in Friend. You start with opening a window and putting a template inside of it. So let's just create the view. And that will open the view. But if you close the view, it won't quit the application. Then the application will be running in the sandbox until you manually kill it. So I can show how that works. So if I now go and I run my program, it will open the window, and I can go into the task manager and see, yes, projects JSX is running. If I close the window, I will see that the project JSX is still running. So I close it there. So what you can do about that is that you can have an onClose event. And you simply quit the application when you close the window. And so if I run it this time, and then I close it, you will see in Manage Tasks that it has quit. Next up is that we need to look at the application itself. So when you see this, you can see that it's showing the file name as an application name. We want to change that by simply running set application name on the application object. On the server, you can write in any language you want, but for the front end, you will run everything in JavaScript. I've gotten this question several times from people, if you could write applications in Ruby or in Python or so on. And actually, you know, the Friend editor supports all these languages with syntax highlighting out of the code code component that we're using, the editor component. At the moment, you would have to run that through an Emscripten implementation, something that would convert that code into JavaScript when running it. That is technically possible, but there is nobody who has integrated this technology in Friend. So at the moment, JavaScript is the only language you're going to be using when making a friend application, obviously on the client side. So now I've set the application name and set it to interactive demo. So if I run it now, it will say interactive demo on the top. Okay, now I want to have something interesting inside my window, so I will make a template. So I'll make a new file, and I already had a new file tab up. You can make new files with this icon up here. And here comes another caveat with friend development. With this version of the API, you don't need title, body, HTML, these tags you don't need. All those will be provided by the sandbox. So the only thing you need to do is to think about the content inside body. So I'll start with making just a div, and I'll give it a class name content full, which is just an absolutely positioned div that takes full width and height. And I'll just write hello inside. Then I'll save this one and I'll make a folder called assets. And in assets, I will make it main.html. So now I have an asset, and this one I'm going to place inside the window I'm opening. So I'll make a file object. And now we come to the friend file system. So this is the home drive of friend. This is my home drive. In here I have my project. So if you open the friend shell, which you can do with system, and then you can do a new shell, then I can cd into home like this, and I can list out the files inside. When I load my file, my asset, I don't necessarily know where the application is installed. I could load this asset with going through home, projects, and into the interactive demo and load it that way. But when you install this on a friend server, it will obviously not be in the home drive anymore. So we use a relative path called progdir. And progdir points to wherever the application is installed. So then I can do progdir assets and main.html, and that will fetch my file. So this is a relative path to where the system has installed the application. And of course, f_onload. We make an onload event, and it has data for us. And then we can load the file. And what we do on the onload event is that we set that content on the view window. And that will display the template inside the view window. So if I now run, it will say hello up in the top. And if we inspect this element, we can see that the content full is an absolutely positioned full div. So now what we want to do is that we want to put some logic in here. And so one of the problems a lot of developers face when they build their first friend application is that they get lost in the scoping of friend. So this new view that I just opened has its own sandbox. So if I go to the JavaScript console, I can go into Workspace, Applications, and it will list one sandbox for friend create and one for my JSX. And you can see there are different iframes here. So there's one iframe which is for this code, and when it opens a new window, that's another iframe. And so if I go into main and I write some elements in here, I cannot use getElementById in this JSX file because it's in a different iframe. And those are sandboxed so that they don't have direct access to each other. So what you can do, you can send messages between these scopes. So for example, after sending the content, I could, for example, send with a callback that when the content has been set, I could do v send message, and I could add a command, something, and some data in here. Could be an array, for example. And if I would do that, that would then enter in here. And if you would have a script in here, you could do application receive message. And then you could, once the messages was received, you could, for example, trap the message command or the message data stuff. You could simply output those to the log. But before we go into that, let's first add some stuff to the window. So I'll take that for later. And so I'll remove that because I don't want to write code inside my layout. So instead, I'm going to include another asset, another JavaScript file. And again, we can use progdir in here. This will be parsed by our API. So simply do that, and I'll make that new file here. And it also has an application run because this one will essentially be executed when the file is, when all the assets for that iframe is loaded. So save that, call it main.js. There we go. And for example, this one could change the content of this one. Call it main. Go in here and I can say document get element by ID main. In our HTML is something else. So now we have got the project JSX, which is starting the application. It opens a window, loads a template, sets it on the window, and we don't need to send the message. The only thing we need to do is to set the data. The data is this HTML, which has hello in a div, and it loads another script from progdir assets, which changes that hello into something else. So now I can close this old window and I'll start a new one, and there we go. Now it's something else. So now that all works. And what I want to do now is I want to put a style sheet for my template. There we go, and then I need to make a new file for my style sheet. There we go. And for the fun of it, we'll just set all colors to green. And if I run this, it doesn't work. So I'll go into the main and make it more specific because it's being set by the theme right now. And there it's green. So this is really everything you need to build a basic friend application. And if you want to avoid the confusing scoping with sending messages and want to make it as simple as possible, you can essentially write your entire application in the scope of the template. If you're new to Friend, this may be a much easier way for you to understand how to build your application, because then you can build on all the experience you have with JavaScript, and then you can learn more advanced things with Friend later. But okay, so now we have this. So then we need to come up with an idea of how to make our interactive demo a bit interesting. So what we could do is that we could start by making a toolbar on top of the window. So I'll make a new div. And I'll give it the ID toolbar. And I'll put in some classes. I'll say this one has the default background. Refer to the manual and you'll see there are some CSS classes you can use to enable the friend theming. So I'll be using the friend theming so that I can show you kind of the standard way of making an application that looks like a friend application if you change to a dark theme or if you change into a light theme. So I'll have this one, and I also put a border on it below. So that's, and I'll put some padding in there as well. And in there I'll have a button, and what we could, for example, do here is have a quit button. And then I'll put in our nice fork awesome icon set. And if I'm not mistaken, it's remove. So we'll do that. And of course doesn't do anything, but we can of course see what we're doing. And obviously something is not working. So let me see, take a look. Somehow it's not doing what I want. Ah, of course, my code is setting it to something else. So I need to remove that. There we go. And then I can run it. And here we have a simple thing. And of course it doesn't do anything. So if I wanted to do something, I need to put an event on it. So what I'll do is that I'll put an ID on it. And I call it button quit. And then I go back into my main. And then I can make a function that sets up all these events. And then I'll run it here. And what it will do, and what we'll simply do is application quit. This one is valid for all the scopes in Friend. It has a global effect. So if I'll run that now, this should quit the application. And it does. So now we have a quit one, but perhaps we want to confirm that we quit. So we put in confirm. And we'll say title. Do you want to quit? And text. If you confirm, the application will quit. And then we'll have a callback. Let's see. So if I'm mistaken, I should probably not have this like that. I should have it like this. I'm taking I'm using the API from my memory, so please bear with me. And there will be a callback if you confirm. And what we can simply do with our debugger now is to examine what comes out. And I'll remove this one. There we go. So let's see what happens. Okay. And the response when I clicked OK is data true. Okay. So I'll close that one and I say I'll change this just for understanding to response. And then if response data is true, then we're gonna do our quitting. And so we can run this. Okay, it does not quit on cancel. And there are quits on OK. So then we have that one set down. You can put a comment here. So this is building a friend application, what I'm showing now, really relying heavily on the friend API. And as I've mentioned, you can use any skill that you have already, and you can use any library you want. You can import other JavaScript libraries and use those. So this tool allows you to work on as large applications as you want inside the friend environment, using the data facilities of friend and connecting to any server framework or REST API. Now I'll get to some of that in a minute. So what we'll do now is that once we have this thing here, let's see if we can use some of our server assets for this interactive demo. So we now have a simple quit button. This should be fairly simple to understand, but what we may want to do is to, for example, get some information from our home drive in here. So what I'll do is that I'll make a new function that shows the contents of the desktop, for example. Show file or content by path. And for that, we're going to make an output div. And obviously, our toolbar now should be on top and the output should be below. So let's style that a little bit. You can remove this one. The toolbar, let's put a height on it, 50 px. And the output, let's do the rest of the screen. Okay, so here we have essentially an output. Let's make it a bit nicer. There we go. Okay, so what I'll do now is that I'll make the function to list out by path. And I'll just run that immediately. I'm actually not 100% sure why. Aha! Okay. Fantastic. Now we're getting somewhere. I did not specify the system library correctly. Boom! Here we go. So now we have a directory listing and we get it back in JSON format. And of course you need to parse this one. So the response code will say OK or fail. If you get OK, then you'll have the useful response data. So what I'll do, I'll parse this thing. First I'll say if response code is not OK, then I'll simply output inside our output div the error message. And when you write code, you get really tired of writing this over and over again. So we made a simplification in the friend API. Just simply do GE. It also has some other features than get by ID, but for now, that's okay. So we do the output is error occurred. Of course, we won't see that because this one is a valid response. So we'll simply parse the icon list. And we use JSON parse response data, and it is an array. So we can then go and list out some data for each array member. And we'll make a string output. And we'll make a new entry class. And what we should do then is perhaps list out the file name. With perhaps the file size in there. So that should be it. Let's make our window a little bit larger. There we go. And then we'll put that on our output. And run it. Boom. So you can see it lists out with 0 size because folders in friend don't take any file size. And so it has 0 file size in here. So of course I could make this recursive to list out the contents of these ones. So perhaps we'll just go ahead and do that actually. So we have this list by path. So the question is, of course, everything in friend is asynchronous. You end up with a lot of asynchronous code. Excuse me. And of course, therefore, if you would program this in C, you could simply write asynchronous code, and that's much easier for recursive functions. But for simplicity, let's actually just put a container on these ones and allow you to click them to load the subdirectory. We call this, well, we can simply make a div, and then we can make an onClick action, load directory, and refer back to self in there. So do that, and for easy reading, we'll just get this one on a new line. Okay, and that needs load directory, and we call that div object. Okay, there we go. And just because we're a little bit lazy, we'll just copy this whole code. There we go. And we're probably also going to have to add an argument in here, which says path plus list a file name. And we should add, actually we could just add path instead to get all the characters we need. Boom. So we'll do that. And then we'll add path here. And that should go nicely into our existing code. And actually we can then simply add the same below, but instead we're going to add it to the div object and get elements by tag name div first member, which is this one here, right? It's this one. So let's see what happens. And of course we should put some styling on this as well. The entry object should be styled. So we'll just add one quickly for that. Background, you can do that blue. Color, white, padding, 5 pixels. Border, radius, 4 pixels. Margin, let's say we do 10. See what happens. Entry object is of course not an ID, it's a class. Boom, so we have it. So let's see what happens. I click this one and doesn't have a div object. So we have to go back and let's do div object, not dib object. Boom. And we did something wrong. So what did we do wrong? We of course should have done this. All right. Boom. Here we get everything below. Downloads empty, documents empty, code examples has something in it. So there we have something to do. And now we have, we could, for example, display the image if you click on it. So let's do that, and let's put a nice hover on this so that we can actually see what we're trying to click. And let's add a span in there just to make it easier for us. I think when it comes to the learning curve, so the question is, what's the learning curve for somebody who knows JavaScript to start using friend applications? What I'm showing right now is dependent upon some classes that come with the friend APIs that allow you to access the friend server functionality. And also using some classes and functions that come with the API that manage that do window management and so on. So we have some API classes and functions and methods which give you access to the FriendOS system components. Those are few in number. So you have library, you have module, you have the file object, you have the view object, and then of course you have some theme related CSS classes. Aside from that, everything else is pure JavaScript. And so in our experience, we've seen that people who even have simple understanding of JavaScript very quickly learn to build friend applications. Even non-developers can, using the developer manual, set up something that does something inside Friend. And it also all depends on what you want to achieve, of course. But if you have a Friend workspace and you want users to use the default applications that are in the system, other applications that are available in the system, but they miss one feature or widget, for example, a weather report, or it could be anything, then that's very simple to write inside of Friend. So when it comes to how long a developer would have to train on building Friend applications, I think reading the manual and then experimenting a bit themselves, they should be up and running with within 1 or 2 weeks to start doing basic things. Obviously, you will have to have some knowledge of how to structure your code. You will have need to have some knowledge of and concept of how to build an application. And as long as you have that, that should be pretty simple. And then, of course, having the awareness of what a friend application actually is. So FriendCreate is a friend application. You see it has tabs. It uses tabs for different files. It has the file browser in here, which is a class that you can use in your applications. And it has, of course, the menus, which belong to the friend view window. And so being aware of all these UI elements before you start writing an application will help you get some kind of concept of what elements you want to use in your application. But other than that, it's really all about knowing JavaScript, knowing about application development, and that should really set you off. And the wonderful thing in Friend is that you don't really have to write any server code whatsoever. You can do everything in JavaScript. And that's really an important point. One thing that we wanted to achieve with Friend was to remove the necessity of having to build server components to get basic applications up and running. And so in that sense, it is kind of like building native applications for Windows, Linux, or Mac OS, in that you have your code editor, you focus on the front end, you build in the features in your UI, and then the OS delivers you the rest of the functionality. Now, of course, if you want to access specific functional databases and those type of things, writing a server module will be of great benefit. And that is something I can get back to in a different tutorial, how to write PHP-based modules. I know that some developers, they want to do it in Node, they want to do it in Python, and that is possible. But our Node and Python module functionality in FriendCore is relatively untested at this point in time. And if somebody would want to do that, that will actually also, of course, spur us to test those features of FriendCore and expand them to fit with the need of the developers. Okay, so let's just quickly go back to the application. So I've added a span around the file name, and so I'll do that here as well. And I'll do that because I need to be able to have a functional hover event. So I'll go in my CSS and I'll say span hover, and I'll say background. Let's just make it white, border radius 3 pixels, and color blue. So, and then we'll just in general actually give this one some padding. And so let's see what happens. Okay, so now we have some hover and we have more. So if I now want to click this one, see this one is not the correct path, so an error occurred. But what I want to do instead is I want to load an image when you click that. So then I go in and this will show another caveat with Friend. So I'll add load picture. And I'll say the file name is, and I'll put in path plus list There we go. That should give us the correct path. So let's do that. And this is, of course, an image that is located on FriendCorp, and it uses our path. So if we simply then just output the path into our output, and run this, you can see it has a whole one, but somehow we broke everything in here. So let's add, instead of taking the path twice, let's do it on file name. That's what we should have done, because our recursive function wouldn't do it that way. So boom. Okay, so now we have a correct path. How do we load this image? Obviously the web browser doesn't understand this path, so we have to give it to the web browser if we want to load it in a normal HTML image element. And we have a function for that. So what we're going to do is that we're going to make an image, and the source will be get image URL, and we'll load it like that. So if we try that, boom, here's the image. If it was difficult to see, we'll load a different one. So what we can do to make it a bit easier for us is that we can give it a class. We call it framed, because we want it framed. So we'll just put it absolutely positioned. And of course this will stretch the image. Here we go. So let's run it. Wallpaper, fire. Okay, so there we go. And we can run it again. Wallpaper, comc, there we go. And let's make an on-click action on it to just remove it when we don't want to see it. So on-click is clear picture, and we make a function called clear picture. Actually, what we can do is that we can just essentially list by home, list by path again, and that should put everything back in order for us. Boom, there we go. So that's a pretty simple application. Now, it could be that you wanted to have some menu items that would do some of these things. So let's just add a menu item, and then we have to go back to the root scope of the application, which is the JSX. So let's then add a menu like this. So you use the object set menu items, and it's essentially just an array of objects. So we want to have a file menu. So what we do then is we create an item, and we say it has name, file, and we have items, and that's another array. And this one has, for example, name, quit, and command. This is a built-in command for the menuing system. So if I start this one now, I get a file menu and I get quit. This is built into friend. And there is a reason for that. But the main reason and the simple explanation is that it simply is needed by every application. So why not build it in? But I want another one. I want functions in here for fun. Functions. And then I'll name one refresh this directory listing, and I add refresh directory as the command. Now I will have to have a message listener, because the menuing system uses the message listener. So, but if I run this now, you'll see I have a functions with refresh directory listing that does nothing. So what I'll do is that I'll make that application receive message, and it receives the message here. So what I will do is that I will simply output the messages to my Chrome log. Boom. Boom, message received. As you can see, here it is, command refresh directory. So what I'll do then is if message command equals refresh directory, then I want to tell my open window, because now we need to do the scoping thing. I want to tell my window that it should refresh. So, but I need to add that to a scope that I can access outside of this function. So what I'll do is I'll say this, which is the application object, main view is v. And then here I'll do this main view send message. And you know what? I could just simply pass this message on, but I'll write it again. So I'll do command refresh directory, and that's all. So I'll send that to the main view. Then I have to go into the code for the main view, which I have here, and I'll make a new function, application receive message, this function. And in here now, I should receive this one. If message command and message command equals refresh directory, then what I want to do is essentially just do that. Boom. So let's see if that worked. Go in here, city lights, functions, refresh, and it works. So now I have a relationship between the menuing system and this window. Of course, you can actually connect menu items directly to Windows by putting in the target view ID in the menu item. But for the purposes of this walkthrough, I won't do that. Okay. So now actually we have several features in here. But I also want to do something fun. Now that I essentially have a picture functionality in there, why not make it so that I can drag and drop an image from my home drive onto here? And I can do that because each window automatically supports that. So if I just put in the window JavaScript function, I just list the messages. I can do console log message, and I can say testing message. And so if I then start this one, and then I just drag an icon, it says drop. So I can see here in that I got a drop, and the data was the home disk, as you can see here. But of course, it needs to be JPEG. Let's say we focus on JPEG images. So I'll go back to my code, and I say if, so I'll just remove that and say, let's just be lazy and copy this one. Drop. And then I'll do, let's just clean this one up. So I'll comment over here. Project JSX asked for refresh directory. A file was dropped. Okay. And in here, as we can see, we have a data member. So what we'll do is we'll just take the first file dropped, essentially. So what we'll do is simply just copy this file here. Actually, since we have the path here, we can just use load picture. Load picture. And this will fail if it's not actually a picture, okay? So what do we have? We have home, that's the path. So let's just do the path. Okay, this should actually do it. So let's try it. Boom. Go in here, wallpaper, and drop. And boom, it worked. And I can do functions and refresh. So now you have drag and drop support in the system. Obviously you can also do drop targets, so you can make sure that you drop on a specific element and so on, again for the purposes of this application. That's out of scope. So the final thing I want to do in this one is that I want to have a package so I can install this in the system. So the only thing I have to do now, all my files have been tracked, so I just go to packages and generate package. Obviously you may want to double click here and look over if there's something missing. And one thing that you could say is missing is an icon image. So you know what we can do, we can be really boring and we can just take a wallpaper and just make that our icon image. It's of course totally overkill, but for the purpose of this one, so I'll do control copy, so I'll hold down the control key and I move over this bug. Okay, and then it copies it and doesn't move it. And I'll call this icon.jpg, which I don't think is possible actually, to be honest. Guess what? I'll just print screen the entire thing. Boom. And I'll just save that as icon.png on my Linux desktop. And I'll remove this one. And what I'll do now is that I will go to an empty desktop in here. Let me see, where do we have it? So I go down there and I have this one. And I'll simply drag it in there. And that's how you upload images. Okay, so this is now going to be our icon. And I'll go into my project and then I'll just add this image. Add images, icon, boom. This is now going to be our icon, save. And now I'm going to make a package. Boom! We have our package generated. Okay. And here you can see the package. And to install this package is actually quite simple. So now I'll close frame create and I'll simply install the package. It says package installed. And now I need to go into my server application. The server application can be run with execute command. I use Control E, but of course you'll find it here on run command. And execute, and in here we'll now see interactive demo is waiting to be validated. Click validate, and that should have installed it. So now I have interactive demo installed. And you'll have to call it before it will be installed. So I'll do interactive demo, and it's not installed, so I need to figure out what was the name I gave it. So it should be in here somewhere. Let me see. Of course, it's in my server app. Here we go. Interactive demo with underscore. Okay, so that's the name. Interactive demo. It wants to have access to the system module and all file systems. Boom, here it is. We have it. And it even has the icon, ugly as it may be. And now it should be in my start menu. So in software, demonstration, interactive demo, I can drag it to my dock, can close here. Boom, we now have it. I can remove the developer tools. I can go in, go to the wallpaper, move in, there we go. And this is now actually a distributable application that can be installed.